How does culture inform writing? Stick around, we'll talk about it. Welcome to the Grind Hill Chronicles podcast. My name is Don Bishop, and today I'm with author Anthony Doyle. And he is originally from Ireland, and he's been living in Brazil for a long time, which I think is interesting right off the bat. And he writes in the speculative fiction space as well. Now, please be patient with us. During the interview, we experienced some lag between us, and it actually did cut the interview short because the lag just got to be too much for us to continue. Now, I have edited the interview so that you're not sitting around waiting for the next person to speak. And I've also tried to accommodate for the fact that sometimes we talked over each other because of this delay. So I've done what I can. Please enjoy. Yeah, so let's get to know you, Anthony. What tell us like your background. How did you come from Ireland to Brazil?
Hi, thanks a lot for having me on. It's lovely to be here, talk to you. I came to Brazil 24 years ago. I was living in London, where I moved after graduation. I went to London to teach English as a foreign language. The idea was that I'd stay there for a year, and then I'd go back to pursue a PhD. I studied philosophy. But that year turned into 5 years. I met my future wife, and then we ended up coming here to Brazil. She's Brazilian. She wanted to come home. She's an only child, so the parents were kind of calling her back, so she came back, and I came with her. So I didn't speak any Portuguese when I arrived here, so it was a bit of a challenge, difficult to to get around. Yeah. But now I work as a translator from Portuguese to English. Fiction, non-fiction, a little bit of poetry, and quite a few screenplays, which is fun. So
awesome. Yeah, you translate from Portuguese to English. Do you know somebody who translates from English to Portuguese?
Oh, most of them are Brazilians. I wouldn't even attempt to do the other way around. I wouldn't even try. But there are some people who are completely bilingual and can do either just as well. I stick to English, translate into English. Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would do the same. Like I speak Spanish and I'm fluent. My wife was born in Costa Rica. I didn't pick up Spanish from her though. I learned Spanish as a missionary in Phoenix, Arizona, but I was assigned to work with the Spanish speaking population. So that's how I learned it and gained fluency. But then when we got married, I'm like, when I was in Phoenix, I saw how the kids grew up. Like all these immigrants that I talked to in Spanish, their kids grew up speaking Spanish in the home, and then they picked up English at church and at school. So let's do that with our kids, and they'll grow up speaking two languages. So we did. So we speak Spanish in our home. Our kids' first language is Spanish. Now, all that said, if I were to take any work translating books, I would only do from Spanish to English, because I know that yes, I'm fluent in Spanish. I'm not native. I haven't read Wheel of Time, Lord of the Rings. I haven't read those in Spanish. I'm familiar with it in English. And so if you brought something in the fantasy genre to me in Spanish, I could give you good phrasing in English and sentence structure, like I could do that translation from Spanish to English. And I could do a translation from English to Spanish, but I wouldn't write it off as being. I wouldn't present it. I wouldn't represent it as being as good.
Yeah.
You know.
No, I completely understand. It's the same for me. I wouldn't. Native speakers always have that extra feeling and that extra something that it's very hard to get when you're not a native.
Mm-hmm.
And so when it comes to translating into Portuguese, I leave that to the to the native. Though I know of a Brazilian author whose name I can't remember right now. I can find it for you if you'd like to know. He writes in the fantasy genre, but he only writes in English. Yeah,
that's interesting. I've thought of writing a book in Spanish, and it's something that I would like to experience and to do. I just don't have the time. I don't have the time. I want to make a living doing this, and I have one book out. I'm writing the second book, and I need to produce the books, quality books,
mm-hmm.
as fast as I can produce quality. And if I were to, it would just be a diversion. It'd be a passion project to go and see how it turned out. And maybe it would turn out amazing and everybody would love it. But it's a shot in the dark whether or not it would be.
Yeah, it's your fantasy is a peculiar genre. I don't actually write fantasy. I wouldn't. I've done some fantasy-ish work, sort of not
Mm-hmm.
total. But I mean, your world building is crazy. The kind of things you have to do to build worlds in fantasy. It's very But
some people take it a lot farther than others. I daydream of taking it really far, but in practice, I don't, at least not yet. So, like with the Grenhill Chronicles, which this podcast is named after, but it is not complete and not published. In like 2014, 15, around there, I started building out Excel spreadsheets for time keeping, because the Grenhill Chronicles takes place across different worlds. And I was saying, like, this world has a gravity that, in terms of Earth G, it's like 1.06 G. This one is in 0.7 G. This one's at 1.2 G. And the rotational speed is 0.99 Earth days, etc. The year for this planet is 1.3 Earth years. And so I created a spreadsheet and I started building it out. And I would love to build that out proper. And then it'd be kind of fun. Like, so this event happens and it was at this time of day on this, in this region on this planet. Plug it into the spreadsheet. Now, what happened at the same time on this other planet? That's what time of day it was. Okay, so this is what the sky might have looked like.
It's fun, but painstaking. Yeah.
Yeah, really tedious.
Yeah, piecing it all together.
So, tell us about your book. You have one out so far?
Yeah, I have.
Excuse me.
Last year in July, I published a novel. It's called Hibernaculum. It came out through a publisher that's now in California. It was in Delaware. They moved to California. It's called Out of This World Press, which is part of Devil's Party Press, which is the parent company. And it was a great experience. The book itself, it's kind of speculative. It's about possible uses of human hibernation technologies in the near future as a way of offsetting environmental damage and as a way of trying to respond to pressures of all sorts, economic, social, financial.
Yeah.
You know? So
That's I read the blurb before we got on the call, and I like the way it was phrased. I'm gonna look at that really quick. Where did I put that? I have too many windows on my computer.
You're a window hoarder.
Wait, there it is. There it is. So, in an imploding world, time is money, time is trouble, and time is risk. For those who can neither afford or bear to exist 24/7, 365 days a year, time is also a solution. And so you mentioned, like, if you can't afford living, and it makes me think of two things, maybe three, but Futurama and Ender's Game sequels. And so in Futurama, and I have only seen a few episodes of this show, but in one episode, he went to he like found his old debit card, I think. So he decides, oh, hey, you know what? I had a bank account. Let me go see how my bank account is doing. So he goes to the bank and checks his balance, and he had like $10 in it in the year 2000. Now in the year 3000, he has $4 billion. And
excellent.
Just because of compounding interest over 1,000 years. And it's kind of funny how he spends that $4 billion, but I'll not get into that right now. And then in Ender's Game, first of all, he saved the world, right? So they probably give him some kind of dowry or something. I don't remember. I don't remember if they give him anything for that. Maybe just a salary from having he was employed, while he did his job in the book Ender's Game. In the sequels, it's far in the future, and so in well, not far, but I think it's a couple hundred years, maybe. But he travels to other planets, and by means of near light speed travel. So he's traveling at relatively quick speeds, which means that with time dilation, time travels very slow for him while he's traveling. He gets to this other planet or these other planets on his journeys, and decades and decades and perhaps a couple of centuries have passed. I don't recall particulars, but I believe he's somewhat wealthy. So there is that. But I would say that if it were widely available to go to the future, it also reminds me of the Three-Body Problem. I listened to that on audiobook.
It was on recently, the series on TV.
Yeah, I haven't seen the series, but yeah. So if hibernation were to become widely available, then it would, and if you were able to earn interest on your bank account while you hibernate, if it's widely available, then that benefit will become less and less. Somebody's got to maintain. Anyway.
Yeah, keep the chambers going. In my book, the hibernation is very short term. It's like 3 months. So what happened was I was looking at some interviews with real hibernation scientists. Like there's a guy called Vladimir Vyazkovsky in Oxford. Another guy called Robert Henning. He has a very interesting TED Talk online. And they were talking about not the space travel aspect of human hibernation, but very real and very present applications in medicine, for example, for trauma victims in car crashes and soldiers in battlefields, for example. And what they want to do is develop some technology that enables medical staff usually, to put people into a short-term hibernation very, very quickly to avoid blood loss, to slow down heart rate, to basically contain shock so that they don't go into shock, so that they're easier to operate on, for example, and so that they're easier to treat in trauma wards or battlefields or whatever. And this really intrigued me, the whole kind of idea of a very short-term hibernation and the possible uses that that could be put to, good and bad. So the novel is, the premise is that there's a consortium that starts opening special hibernation facilities in every major city around the globe. So you can volunteer to go there and spend 3 months, 6 months is generally the maximum. And in that time, you could sublet your apartment to somebody else, so that helps with accommodation shortages. Somebody else would get a temporary vacancy in your job. For example, you would consume less water, consume less meat, consume less of everything. You also wouldn't be physically present in the city, so that's one less car on the streets or one less person on public transport. And you would get something back for the time hibernated. So they have pension plans for frequent hibernators, for example, sort of a time bank. So the novel was basically all about this kind of business plan, as it were. So the main character is really a process. And it looks at the before, the during, and the after of these hibernators, these modern day hibernators. And, it was really because I'm not scientific, so it was kind of challenging to research all the science of this. Complicated stuff. I don't know.
Yeah, it'd be interesting.
But
so to segue into what we had nominated for the topic, how do you think your cultural experience, whether growing up in Ireland or in Brazil, how do you think your culture informed your writing or your cultural experience?
There's a sense of, first of all, displacement. It's a peculiar sensation, but I couldn't write a book about Ireland now, because I don't really remember it well. I don't have very close contact with it day to day. I don't know how.
Because it's been so many years.
Yeah, I don't know. I've gone back, I visit, but I don't really know how the people speak anymore. I don't know what's happening, day to day there, the culture of it and so forth. So anything I were to write about Ireland would have to be based in the past. But I don't really have a very good memory for past events, so that kind of makes that difficult. And on the other hand, writing about Brazil is also a little bit difficult, because I feel like I want to do it in Portuguese. And I've written a children's book in Portuguese, but I couldn't write a novel in Portuguese. It just wouldn't happen. So I'm almost neither here nor there. I'm in an in-between. So for me, I end up writing in imagined spaces, unreal spaces. For example, Hibernacle takes place in San Francisco in the 40s of next century. So it...
And the people who hibernate are neither here nor there. They're kind of, they're here in society, and they're also just completely out of it.
Exactly.
So I think it's fitting.
Literally. So it leaves me kind of free in a way to invent new places to base the novel. But it also, there's a lot of multiculturalism too in it. Like this novel has Latinos, it has Chinese, it has a range of different figures and people. Brazil's very multicultural, so you end up getting into contact with all sorts of Lebanese, Oriental, South America, other parts of South America, North America, Africa.
Yeah.
So it's very rich, which is something that didn't have back in Ireland. So.
What part of Brazil are you in?
I mean, São Paulo City. Huge place. Huge.
Okay.
I don't know. I think it's in the top 5 in terms of the world's largest cities, and
it's huge,
massive. By the time you think you've seen it all, it's all changed, and you have to go back and see it again. So it's constantly changing in a kind of chaotic way. It's a very chaotic place. Have you ever been here?
No, the furthest south I have actually. I'd have to look at a map and see if I've been that far south. I have been to the southern hemisphere, but I went to American Samoa, which is probably not as far south as São Paulo. But I went to American Samoa, spent a week there once. The closest to São Paulo or any part of Brazil that I've been is in Costa Rica. I've been there once for about 2 weeks, and that was actually for my mother-in-law's funeral. But
no, it's a pity.
Yeah.
I've heard
if I were to ever wind up living in Costa Rica, it would be because my wife was born there and her family is from there. I wouldn't just like randomly go and I don't know, move to Colombia. There would nothing against Colombia. I think so. Like actually, when I was on my mission in Phoenix, one of my mission companions and I talked about kind of daydreaming. We talked about taking a car trip through Mexico, just driving down through Mexico. Never happened because we didn't have money or time for it. But it would have been a really fun experience. I would love to travel through Latin America. But if I were to ever live in Latin America, it would be Costa Rica because that's where my wife has family ties.
Yeah, I've never been there. I've heard it's fantastic, beautiful place. Hopefully, I'll get there someday.
Yeah, and I got to try some new fruits. That was fun. Went to a market, kind of a flea market, but for food. Don't know what to call it, but a big market. Everybody comes with their, I guess a farmer's market is what you call it. Oh, that looks interesting. Let's buy some of that.
We have one of those here in this street, just down the end of the street. Every Thursday, it arrives. They circulate around the city. These markets. They set up really early at like 4:30 in the morning. It's still totally dark when they set up, and they go through to 4 or 5 in the afternoon.
Oh, wow.
And you can find all sorts of crazy things you wouldn't imagine in food-wise, spices. The array of fruits is just dazzling. Back in Ireland, we have like...
Yes, so that's perfect. So how culture informs writing. That's something I have envisioned for this podcast. I kind of forgot because it's been many months. But last year, my wife and I talked about it several times. Excuse me. We talked about it several times about how it'd be fun to bring the world building for the Grand Hill Chronicles onto the podcast. And, that was part of the original concept of the podcast, was to share story narration, like actually read the story in the podcast, and to share the world building and other things behind writing it. And so with the Grand Hill Chronicles, which it's a fantasy world, right? And or fantasy universe with a science fiction foundation in my mind. but in the actual story, it's supposed to come as just fantasy. And anyway, so they have foods that we don't have, or they have foods from other parts of our world that are going to show up in my story. That which actually I want to do some of that with Nightshade Unicorn, because the main character Olabva is going to do some traveling to other parts of the world, and she needs to encounter people from other countries with different cultural backgrounds and different foods. So foods, like what?
Oh, well, Brazil for food is a regional thing. Depends on which
Yeah.
region you go to. There's each region has its own sort of approach. Like up in the northeast, some of it's quite spicy. Up in the northeast of Brazil, they like pepper. They like this.
Mhm.
They have this thing called dende, which is really it burns. But they use it a lot on seafood, which is really. They make these crazy dumplings with prawns, and they put lots of this dende. It's really good, actually.
Uh-huh.
It's very with sort of creamy filling. There's a place called Minas, which is it's ranch land, really, and they have lots of very meaty foods with black beans. They love black beans for some reason. Everything has black beans. Sao Paulo.
Actually, I did a contest. I did a contest last fall or last year. I guess we started it. Lasted several months, but we did a contest and wound up giving away a gift certificate. But the contest we called Fantasty. It actually came from we were talking on the podcast, and one of us misspoke, and fantasy came out as Fantasty, and we're like, "Whoa, that's an idea!" So we called the contest Fantasty, and we had I asked people to share pictures of food that you make or that you grow. Share your pictures, and we'll do a contest, and the winner gets a gift certificate to the restaurant of your choice. And so that was fun. I would like to do that again. I think life needs to calm down a little bit on my end, but yeah.
What was the winning entry? Do you remember?
What was the what? Oh, the winning entry. I don't remember. I think like it was a plate with multiple dishes. You know, it wasn't just a slice of pie. You know, so I think it was like this whole dinner, and so there was the main course and the starch and the dessert. But yeah, it looked delicious. I don't remember what it was though. But I did put it. I shared that via my newsletter. I probably shared it via Twitter as well. I think I did. But yeah, Fantasty was fun.
So you tried to create different foods for your world in your novel.
Yes, and oh, sorry, the delay is back, and so I didn't know you were still talking.
No problem.
Okay. Yeah. So what was that?
No, I don't usually get this delay. I don't know what's going on. It's odd.
I have done a little bit of it. I want to do some good exhaustive world building for the Grand Hill Chronicles, which is part of why I set it aside, because I needed something I didn't care as much about, or wrong phrasing, that I wasn't so invested in. I wasn't so entrenched in. That's why I published Nightshade Unicorn, which is available now. Hint, hint, listeners. It's a good book. So with Nightshade Unicorn, I'm not doing as heavy world building as I am with the Grendhill Chronicles. With Grendhill, like it all started with a dream I had where I was carrying these weapons to another world, So there's hopping between worlds. There's these babies born, and then a weapon materializes in their hands. And there's a short story that I've written in that universe, and another short story that I've half written in that universe. It's on some other world. There's no like interaction. It's kind of like Rogue One, a Star Wars story.
Mm-hmm.
So I've written a short story and part of another short story that are Grand Hill Chronicles stories, but they're not Grand Hill Chronicles. So one of them is called Cherry Melon, and it occurs up in the branches of this immense tree, kind of like the Avatar home tree. So
Right.
there's this giant tree, and up in the branches, there's a village there. And this tree is a cherry melon tree. And you get cherry-sized watermelon.
Wow.
What was that?
No,
yeah,
that's
cherry-sized watermelon. Watermelon the size of cherries. You can just nom, nom, nom. Tasty watermelon snack. And then in the roots of the tree is another village called Cherry Nut, and it's cherry flavored peanuts. They grow underground, you know. So just these things that don't exist in real life, like you have these cherry flavored peanuts or cherry peanuts, and then these cherry sized watermelons. So like I need to invent and describe the flavors and textures, and I need to throw in I need to mix in some of these fruits that we got to try in Costa Rica. Like there's one, what's it called? It's a palm fruit, but it's not a date. It's not a sweet fruit. And you boil it so that it turns soft. Oh, I don't remember what it's called. But yeah, so there's that. And then there's one called cas. I don't know what it's called in English, but cas is good. And there were other fruits. Like,
do they have the star fruit
I don't remember.
in Costa Rica? Must have it, yeah. It's shaped like a star.
Mm-hmm.
They call it carambola. It's quite bitter too. It's quite bitter, but it's literally star shaped. It's the craziest little fruit.
Yeah. So
these they're here.
In Nightshade Unicorn, the in the beginning, there's like this town celebration. It's called Greenstone Observance. They have their holidays called observances, and Greenstone Observance is one of them. And the food there is pretty European. It's like European and Anglo style food that I described there. But I want to go abroad and stray from that. Like I want to have mangoes and other lesser known fruits like cas.
Yes, cas. I'm trying to think if it doesn't ring any bells. I don't think there's a could have some other name here. Doesn't sound very familiar though.
Yeah. And you probably know tamarindo.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that what it's called in Portuguese?
It's tamarind. What's it called here?
Yeah.
It'll come back to me. I can't think of it right now. I'm not a fan, so I have to avoid them.
Yeah, it's not so juicy. You just kind of suck on it. It's like it's naturally a fruit snack. You know.
It's Amora.
It's kind of leathery.
Amora's plum.
Well, I hate to say it, but I think the delay is getting longer. The lag. I don't think it's the computer's fault. It's probably the network's fault. Because we're really far apart, and the signal's got to get relayed so many times, and also it's not direct between you and me. It goes through the Squadcast service that's recording us.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, I really appreciate your time. Maybe sometime we'll do it again, but right now it's just too much of a delay.
Okay. Yeah. Well, thanks a lot. Nice to meet you. And,
yeah.
Good luck with your books.
Where can our listeners find your book?
Well, it's on Amazon. It's available on Amazon in paperback, hardback. It's in a digitally voiced audioback as well, audiobook, and in Kindle. So it's in all 4 formats. It's available there. My website is Anthony-Doyle-Doyle.com, and there's some links on that too.
And Doyle is Doyle, and I'll put that in the show notes.
Perfect. Well, thanks a lot, and it was nice talking to you.
Likewise, and I'm so sorry about the network delay. It was good while it lasted, and then it's just the delay keeps increasing. I'll try to fix it for listeners' benefit. I'll try to fix it and line up the audio and video in editing. But for now, it's making the interview more difficult. But thank you so much for your time, Anthony Doyle. Listeners, check out his book. I think it sounds really interesting. And we'll catch you next time on the Grand Hill Chronicles podcast.